It's the Jere Metcalf Podcast, where top real estate agents tell how we do it. And on the show today, we've got a good friend of mine and a top real estate agent in South Florida with one Sotheby's, Rusty Hanna. Rusty, thank you for coming on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
There's so much to tell them about you. Happy New Year to you. It is 2024, and it's going to be about a month into 2024 when everybody gets to listen to this.
Yeah, it's already February, or will be.
It is. Yeah. It is.
Happy Valentine's Day.
So this is the thing. I'm just going to go in, because here's the thing, everybody, y'all need to know about Rusty and I. Is it Rusty and I or Rusty and me? About me? Rusty and me. The thing you need to know about Rusty and me is that we could chat about everything and nothing forever. And so I want to make sure that you also get to know Rusty and there's a few things about you. For example, you've got amazing marketing, you've got a podcast, and you have an incredible ability to communicate and negotiate that we've kind of discovered because you also were in Breakthrough Luxury Coaching, top agent South Florida, one Sotheby's International Realty. You've got a huge podcast out there. And what else? What should we tell them?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it is true though. We could talk about everything and nothing for hours, and none of it being about real estate. So this is actually going to be. This might be difficult for us to just focus on real estate for an hour,
right? Or we could try to talk about football because you're good at that. But if we did that, it'd be really quiet on my end.
No, maybe. You're capable. You're capable. It's fun.
Except for, I don't know how you feel about this topic. Now, everybody, don't worry. This is going right into sales. I have no idea. Tom Brady.
Yeah.
I know the name is kind of so big, it's cliche at this point.
What about him?
So I'll never forget when he played in the Super Bowl or he was in the Super Bowl. He was with the Patriots at the time. He's a Buccaneer now.
He's retired now. But he did play for the Bucs for 2 years.
Well, I actually got a tour of their football stadium a few months, but it's been a year. Was it a year ago?
Where? At Gillette?
He was still there in Tampa.
Oh, the one in Tampa.
Yeah. Where they anyway, but back to the Super Bowl. So now I had no idea who Tom Brady was. No idea. Because again, that my whole comment about football earlier and remember the Super Bowl? They were playing the Falcons in Atlanta and the Patriots, and remember the first half or whatever.
That, yeah.
Like right. And I was so excited because what it meant for Atlanta as a community and to be proud of our football team
sure.
Bringing us. I was so seriously emotional. And then I remember watching, I'll see this guy. I didn't know he was Tom Brady, but the look on his face, I'm like, the dude, he lost. Why is he still focused? That look on his face is as if he has a shot. If his team, this is so cute. Who is this quarterback that thinks his team could win? That's what I'm thinking. I'm embarrassed to admit now. And
that was a tough day for Falcon fans.
Wow. Well, I was watching the game of all places at my mom's house, and she's worse about football than me. And I've got my kids in the back seat, and I'm listening to it on the radio or the satellite, whatever. And I start hearing, and I'm literally, I think I might have cried. And that's a lot of people cry, but for me, that's saying a lot. And I got home and watched the rest, and I just remember this Tom Brady guy. I was that, what a lesson, right? Whatever is in front of you doesn't mean if you focus and dial in. I mean, look at what can happen.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was the largest comeback in Super Bowl history. It's a monumental collapse by the Falcons. It's by a guy who is largely, if not consensusly, I don't think that's a word, but by consensus, greatest quarterback to ever play the game. So it's not as though somebody who was unfamiliar with the stage, if you will, right? He's got a lot of rings. He's got 6 rings. A lot of rings. Does he have 7?
What is a ring?
I don't even know how many. I think he's got 7. He's got 7. He won the Bucs. He's got 7 rings. This guy. So
rings. Right. Oh yeah. Right. I thought you said.
So he's not unfamiliar with that stage. So if there's anyone who would have done it, it would have been him. So yeah. And does that relate to what we're talking about today?
I would say so.
Does it?
Well, maybe it has to do with the different perspectives on business in general. But my perspective is, Tom Brady's talented, but he's still human, like the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
If you go into whether it's real estate or football, you go in, dial in. But here's something interesting you just said. You say, Tom Brady, he knows the deal. He knows the landscape. He's talented and he's skilled. Like a lot of people go into real estate with no talent and no skill. Well, I wouldn't say talent. I think the cool thing about real estate is everybody's got a talent, right? They come in and assume there's no skill other than maybe to like make a lot of phone calls and get lucky. Have you noticed that? Or maybe it's just me.
Yeah.
And that's
look,
not like,
like
you said, Tom Brady was out there doing it. If you're good at what you do and you know the landscape, you can make it happen.
You can. I think the big picture really is that just like that particular situation, most situations that you run up against in our business are really tough. Like there's a lot of really tough situations that you're going to run up against. And I almost cussed there. And I'm going to try to dial it back. I'm going to try to dial it back a little bit. I do know that, look, on my podcast, I can cuss all I like because it's a man's show and a sports podcast. So I try to dial it back a little bit, but I will slip up. So I'm just warning you. And for those who don't know, I'm pretty sure, and this is why the two of us get along so well, Jere might have a worse mouth than me. So for anyone who's not experienced that, I'm just being honest. And
if you listen to the show, which you might not, you've experienced it a little, but not really. But I'm sorry, keep going.
So we get here half an hour before we start recording and have a full-on conversation about everything and nothing. And it's an entirely we should just put a show together of that. We should have started recording half an hour, 35 minutes ago.
Everybody would have been laughing because we talked nothing. I'm trying to figure. My mic isn't as like established as yours. Excuse me, but we talk about everything and nothing. It's kind of funny though, right?
It's funny. So what I was saying was, it's hard. All of this is hard. And if anyone who tells you it's easy, they're lying to you. It's not. So understand, I had a great conversation with a fantastic agent down in Miami last night who she's about to really be able to do this full time. She has 3 young kids. The youngest is going to be going to school in a few months, and then she's really able to like kick it in and put all her efforts into it. And she's brilliant. She's brilliant on social media, great attitude, great aura. Like she's awesome. And we had a great conversation about how it's not easy. It just simply isn't, right? Everyone has a real estate license. I posted something the other day on social media that was, you know what? Let me read it because I think it's super important for anyone to either read it, to know it, to understand it. This is what I posted. Let's see if I can get it to hold. It said, this is from Inman, right?
Is this on Instagram or where is this again?
This was on IG. So at Rusty Hanna is my handle. Yeah. So these are facts. These are factual numbers, but the end of this just got me, right? It was just too great. So it says 37% of licensed real estate agents sold 0 homes last year. So that's the first thing you can kind of like, what? Okay.
Just take
37% of licensed agents sold 0 homes, 0. Nearly half, so nearly 50% sold 0 to 1. 70% sold 0 to 5. So you've got 30% of all licensed agents in the country.
But those numbers add up to more than 100. Sold, keep going. Just keep going.
It's 0 to. So 70% of the agents sold up to 5 homes.
70% of all agents
sold
less than 5
homes or less.
I got it
last year. You got it? You with me?
So of all agents, 47% sold 0. Of all agents, which would include that 47%, 70% sold less than 5. So of the 70% that sold less than 5, over half of those sold 0.
Correct.
Insane, and then the remaining, right?
It's insane. And then it goes on to say, so I mean, for heaven's sake, if you're going to hire someone to help you buy or sell a home, hire a full-time professional. I know your aunt got her real estate license last year, but she probably doesn't know what she's doing.
Oh, that's kind of harsh, but true.
But it's true.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. It's what I'm saying is everyone's got an agent or everyone's got a license. And then people use, so you're already going against an enormous amount of people who either think or their clients think that they're capable of doing something that you're better at than them. And I think that it's really important to understand that your worth and your value and what you think of your capabilities, no matter how long it takes to get a deal done. And I got a perfect example, and probably something you want to talk about anyway, that we talked about in the Q&A on a property that I just got under contract that I had multiple people tell me I'd have given up on that a long time ago.
I love that story too.
But if you just understand that you have to be persistent and you have to, it just doesn't come overnight. I've been doing this almost 25 years, right? I've been doing real estate. I've been doing mortgages. I got in the industry to do mortgages, which I still do, 25 years ago.
Which is kind of huge because it gives you a unique, I don't know, it gives you a special understanding and insight into this industry.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I got a lot of people don't really understand. I also own a title company. So being a mortgage broker, a title agent, and then the real estate agent, for my clients, and for me, because it does help push along things when you're dealing with the aunt, right, who got her license last year, and she doesn't necessarily know what she's doing, potentially. It could be your uncle too. It helps get the process moving along. I'm happy to do both sides of the deal. I just want to get to the closing table, make my clients happy, get paid, and everybody's good.
The thing is that there's 3 reasons why people hire a real estate agent. Or people hire anybody, just in general, right? Going into this aunt thing, they're either the cheapest, which is not a fun game to play, especially not these days, because you're going to compete with anyway.
Well, this market's changing.
There's well, let's go into that too. The least worst, right? The least bad, because most people do not like real estate agents. That's when they hire their aunt. Well, at least she's my aunt.
Sure.
Right. And then if they hire their aunt, that's because they're not hiring the real reason why people hire what they pay for, because it's the best in their world, in the world of what they need and looking for. That's it. Like, back to your original, what you were talking about is people come in this business. 70% of people don't even sell 5 houses a year who are a real estate agent. Wow.
Well, it's the old adage. It's the old adage. 95% of the agents make 95% of the money.
It's right. 80-20 rule, but not in this. It always has.
It's always been true. It always will be true. So get yourself into the 5%.
Right. Which, back to be the best.
But you're gonna get kicked in the teeth.
You know how many agents don't? Yeah, hell yeah. You got back to the Tom Brady. That man was, after all the years of being as good as he was still dialed in and going to make it happen. And you only do that with skill. I think one of the, I know you're the one being interviewed, but if you asked me, what is the ones? Well, there might be 2, and both of them you are really good at. The skills that people lack. There's perseverance and persistence. But I've seen people be really persistent with the wrong skill set and the wrong idea and go nowhere fast. Number 1, know your market. Number 2, know how to communicate well. Back to that story. This is actually circling back to the story that you're going to tell. But anyway, communicating with people really well to make stuff happen, right? And then actually knowing the market to know what to do to get the result.
Yeah, I mean, knowing the market, everybody's good. You have to be to be successful, right? You have to know the market. I mean, that's like going to a car dealership. I know, but that's just a lack.
How many people don't know the market? If you just knew the. Keep going. I apologize, but
no, this is what we do. This is what we do. I know.
Oh, I know, but I've gotten really good about not interviewing my guests, except for you.
You don't have to interview. Why are we interviewing anybody?
I mean, exactly. Exactly.
So what I'm saying is, so I think it's just a lack of intent.
Bring the Dalai Lama in here to get real philosophical with us too, because I love that anyway. But anyway, go ahead.
It's like going to the car dealership, which I hate. But it's like going to the car dealership and you're not so sure about the car, right? You think you like the car. You're going and you're looking for a particular type of car or a model or whatever the situation is. You go in, but you don't really know the ins and outs of it, right? And you go there and you sit down in the car and you ask the car salesman who works in the building and sits in this car 25 times a day some questions. And they can't answer them for you. And I'm like,
Not
what
good.
the fuck am I doing sitting here with you? Like you literally don't know anything about the car that I'm interested in.
How am I going to get excited about it?
That's just understanding your market, right? That's his market or her market.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can't give you the answers, if you're going to cold call people, I think this is super important too, which I think cold calling is one.
Cold call's a trigger word for Jere Metcalf, but go ahead.
I know that. But if you're going to call people, if you're going to
we'll use the word cold call
people,
because I like that. Or cold call. Let's say cold call. Whatever. Don't let me change
you're
it.
going to do.
Yeah.
To try to communicate to people that you've never spoken to before. Is that more? Is that
no? Or what? Yeah. No. But
so,
no. I think you should say cold call because I love that. Like, let's go with that. Go. Give us your story.
So if you're going to cold call people, it's important to have, number one, a message, right? I think it's you're not just calling. You're not going to call them and get a deal. Maybe if you're calling expireds. Maybe if you're calling expireds, you can get in the door. But even that's a totally different topic, conversation, whatever.
Well, that's also like, that's a whole nother conversation that would be fun to talk about. But go back to this one.
So I think,
see, everybody, this is what Rusty and I do. We want to talk about 5 things at once, but keep going.
She interrupts me constantly. Call. Yeah. So if you're called, let's say, I like to do this. Let's say you just sold a house. You had a seller. Let's say you had a buyer. Say you had a buyer. So nobody knows you, right? Nobody in the neighborhood. Say you have a buyer in the neighborhood and you sell a house to the buyer in the neighborhood.
Like you really have a buyer, not saying you have a buyer.
No, like you sold, say you sold a house. Right? Say you sold a house in the neighborhood. You had the buyer and you want to call and you want to communicate that to the people within the community. You're doing it as a courtesy. Did you know, hey, my name is Rusty Hanna with One Sotheby's. I had a buyer who just closed on your neighbor's house. Did you know that it sold the other day? And you just shut up. And no, I didn't know that. What did it sell for? And then you talk a little bit and then you ask another question because people love to talk about themselves. Ask questions. Very, very, very important. Ask questions. Stop talking. Not at all what I was trying to talk about at this story, but
that was good though.
But the point was silence. They may very well then ask you something about the neighborhood. Was that the highest price in the community? Did that sell for the highest price per square foot? Did anything sell higher than that in the last year? That's all market knowledge. So if they ask you that and you've had a 5-minute conversation with them and they think you're awesome. Wow, this guy's great. This girl's great. And then they ask you a question about the car and you don't know how much horsepower it has. They're going to want to get off the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes back to the market knowledge. If that's, I'm not even sure that's what you said, but in that realm of.
But in the realm of, excuse me, everybody.
Know your market. That's what it was.
Cold I had over Christmas. But yeah, it goes back to market knowledge and communication. Market knowledge and communication. That's it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Communication, I think, communications is a lot harder. I mean, market knowledge you can just get. You can pick up.
Well, when you can communicate the value of your knowledge efficiently in the way that the other person receives it to recognize it's solving a problem they actually don't have a solution for. I say that a lot, but it's true. That's what they're not looking to. They're not even look. Most people, there's 2 sides of this, right? Most people are interviewing an agent, whether they know it or not. They're making, I don't even know the study. There's a study that shows how people make decisions before they consciously know they made them.
Mm-hmm.
And in marketing,
they're just trying to validate the decision, basically.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Right. They're just trying to validate it. So whether it's marketing, whether it's whatever it is, people have made the decision. You're just either confirming it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so where that's relevant is you don't get the listing at the listing appointment. You get it way before then, unless, right, or not, or
you're there to confirm. You're there to. They don't even interview the other person. They're just there. You're there to confirm that they want to go with the other guy or girl. So it's you have to be able to read sometimes. And that really goes to, I mean, that like
This
really
really
kind of
goes-
like going into that story, right? Which is, which was a pretty wild story. But yeah, I communication, it's vital.
I think we
It's
need
the
to
most
go,
important aspect, but it's hard. It's hard
right.
sometimes.
Well, here's the thing though. So let's kind of go into this story for a minute, because it's something we said, a few things we said, we're talking about right now is people, like everybody wants, let's say you're the agent that, whether you're in the 47% that didn't sell anything last year, or the 70% that sold less than 5, or the 90% that sold a few more than that, or the 95% that sold 5% that sold 95% of the market, right? Like we all want listings. And when we look at listings, the real thing we're talking about right now is you're getting the listing way before the phone call or the appointment, right? Now, there are times when maybe you're not, which is a little bit of what, let's look at that. There are times when you, like, I'm going to kind of preface it and you come and interrupt me when you want to take over, but you had a listing that I think you had sold the property, but they had been swayed to the least worst option. And meaning the person that they just kind of knew, but didn't have the experience. And it was like, should we pop a cuss word in here now? I'm going to warn you, what the fuck? It was like, what the fuck? Like, they're not, like, you were clearly like the one for the job, right? And you had kind of lost the opportunity. And so it was like, all right, what the freak? Like, what? See, I'm trying to be good. I'm trying to be good, everybody.
Good. Proud of you.
Anyway, when I know I'm not being recorded, I'm a lot worse. But what's going on? And so I might let you take over here, because in that you were clearly the best one for the job. But as I quote Chris Voss sometimes or often, the biggest problem isn't the facts and the stats, it's the emotions that are happening, and identifying where, especially when people are making a decision like that to not hire you did not make sense. Like, where's that decision coming from? And how do we get to the root of it? Like, how did you get to the root of it to have the conversation that literally changed the course of everything? And now you've got this bit, I think it's is it a $4 million?
Yeah. 4.3 under contract
listing
now.
Right.
Thankfully.
That is now your listing now under contract. And it really, I think, came down to a conversation. Now you fill in the blanks there. Where should you take over this story?
I think it's just the lack of understanding what the problem was. So there was no way for me to understand what the problem was. I know what happened over the course of some time, because I did sell them the home 6 or 7 years ago, and then they had put it back on the market at some point, not with me.
That's right.
And that was kind of the going back to getting kicked in the teeth. Right? That's a perfect example of 3 years ago. Gutted. Right? It was one of those things where
you'd done everything right.
I had no idea what had happened. And I've gotten better with this. I tend to, and this was part of my conversation last night. I used to be a little bit more emotional, a little bit more emotionally invested in my clients, not in my business, because that sounds poor, but in circumstances that may arise. And as my career kind of veered more into the luxury end of things, you really have to kind of disassociate yourself a little bit and understand that this is paper, right? This is a business transaction, and emotions need to be left way back there.
Well, what's interesting too, don't lose your, is a lot of people will say luxury is not transactional. And I think what's interesting about that is that as it gets into luxury, and this is where, like, tell me if you don't agree, but it gets more and more emotional. The problems are more and more of the emotions, or kind of they are everywhere. But in luxury, if you don't have the ability to regulate your emotions and understand how your emotions, the other person's, are probably the biggest part of the problem rather than anything else, you're not going to do well in that market, in that realm.
Right. So I think the ability, as you said, regulate, it's the ability to regulate those emotions with yourself, right? So you have to be emotionally competent and emotionally confident to be able to, I learned this a long time ago, in very, very, very beginning of my career, is that, there's a lot, as we know, there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong in a transaction. From this to that, there's a million things that can go wrong. And before they
often do.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you're going to run into stuff, right? I mean, that's just the nature. Before you pick up the phone to call your client, put the fucking phone down. Figure out a solution or two or three, and then pick up the phone.
And have the conversation from their perspective.
Provide them with solutions. Like, we're dealing with this, but it's okay. I've got these three options are our best solutions for whatever hurdle we're facing, whatever problem it is. I don't really
Everybody
like to say problems,
rewind this and write that down.
But long time I was like, oh my God, I was new, whatever. There's a problem. My clients have to know right away, and they really
like
don't.
The doctor, oh my God, you have cancer.
Yeah, they really don't, and they shouldn't.
Is that it? Yeah.
Right. Let's find. You're a problem solver. That's really what we are. We're a connector. We try to connect the best we can for transactional purposes, and we're ultimately at the end of the day, we're problem solvers, right? Because
that's right. There's the dichotomy of a real estate agent. The best agents are the best problem solvers. The best problem solvers are in the moment, and sometimes they're not really good about going back and setting up their systems and their assistants for success. Right. And that's a whole nother conversation.
It is. And I haven't heard anyone else use the word dichotomy other than me in like a long time. This is very interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah. Good word.
It is a good word. It should be, I don't know if it should be used more, but it's really relevant.
It should be. Sure.
It's relevant in how everything's kind of a dichotomy, really. Back to, because we got to finish the story because it's a really good one. I love this story. But the book Open about Andre Agassi. Did you ever read the autobiography? That man, everybody's a dichotomy, and he kind of talks about that, and he was one. But this show's not about Andre Agassi or his biography.
No, but I think
we're a dichotomy.
But okay, so let's talk about dichotomy, right? Which I think I'm very.
Don't worry, everybody. We're going to get back on that story because it's good.
Fine.
Let's do dichotomy.
It is what it is. Dichotomy. I'm very much.
The story is so good. The story is so.
All right, we'll tell the story so we can get through it. Then we talk about relevance.
And then we'll talk about dichotomy. We'll give them the story. Give us the story. It's such a good story, especially when you walk us through it.
So
I love the story.
Back to it going on the market with someone, and then it didn't sell. And I was every word you can think of when I saw the email come over for a broker's open. So I didn't get a response.
It wasn't
back.
yours.
Yeah. It wasn't mine. Right. So I didn't get a response back when I tried to reach out. And I was like, you know what? I don't know what happened. I don't know what I did. And I was really, really pissed off for a couple weeks, which I felt as though I had every right to be, although I didn't really know the situation. But I was dealing with my emotions. So about maybe 2 years goes by. I know the home is rented for a period of time. I didn't know that at one point they had moved back. And I said, I'm going to reach back out. Because...
Now, at what point was this? After it had been listed and come out and not sold?
Yeah, I mean, this was like 2 years after it had been listed.
Okay.
But so I thought they were still out of town. I knew it had been rented. I didn't know that they had moved back. So I said, I'm going to reach out because at this point I'd gotten over myself.
And that was about a year ago?
That was about it was about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
So I'd gotten over my emotions gotten out of my feelings. And that was one of the big triggers. One of the big triggers that really, I mean, because I always knew it was, again, transactional to an extent, and it's business.
But what was the trigger? What do you mean trigger?
That just knowing that at any time the loyalty's not quite there, right? You have to nurture everything. And you can't get mad when they go and they list with somebody else, or they go and they buy something at an open house, or they go and use their aunt.
But you can change the outcome because that's what you did.
So sometimes, but I got over my feelings and I reached back out. Because I'm like, well, they tried to sell it once. Maybe they want to sell it again. So I reached back out. Didn't hear from them. Probably about a month later, I got an email back. Said, thanks for reaching out. Blah, blah, blah. Whatever the email said, we appreciate it. Let's grab a coffee sometime. We'd love to sit down with you and chat and kind of, run you through what happened. And okay. So that went on for, about 6 months. We got busy. We didn't get together. Finally got a text. Hey, we'd like to sit down with you. Okay, fine. So I went down, I sat down, got the whole story. I understood. Again, you don't know the circumstances. So until you're told the circumstances, you just have to be okay with it.
And realize there's stuff you don't know.
100%. There's a lot of stuff I didn't know. And all good. Boils down to they want to sell the house. So they came back to me, but they also said, look, we're also going to interview the person who tried to sell it last time. We feel as though that person was very helpful in our time of need, and yada, yada, yada.
And there was a sense of remember, there was a sense of obligation to that person. Well, we had given it to that person. There was really this conversation about we really owe it to that person.
Yeah, there was very much a sense of obligation, and I wasn't sure how to get past that because the obligation wasn't towards me, right? The obligation was for somebody else. So how am I going to be the one sitting there validating why they should just use the other person?
Right. And the only obligation they seem to have to you was to at least return your phone call a few months later and just tell you that this time. Right.
Yeah. So it was one of those things, but I had always had a feeling that one of the parties was a little aloof to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get into too much detail, but
yeah.
I didn't know why. I had no idea. Honestly, everyone around that whole situation was we were all good, and maybe there was stuff going on I didn't know about again. But the whole point was I needed to find, and you and I had a call because we're like, all right, how do we strategize? Because I'm going to go into this listing appointment. I've been in quite a few, but this one was a little bit different because it seemed like it was playing to the emotions. It seemed as though there were circumstances that I was unaware of. How do we get past whatever it is, right? Because so now I got to find out what potentially it was. And then
you were going in losing. You were
find a solution.
You were going into a situation where most listings you won, you were actually going in and that wasn't your listing. You were just going in because it was a formality.
Yeah. I was validating for them. Yeah. And this one I wasn't. I don't know if this. I don't know. I didn't know. So, one of my favorite books, and I don't read a whole lot, you know that, but one of my favorite books is your favorite book or one of your favorite books, right? Never Split the Difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's all about communication. It's about negotiating, but it's not really negotiating. It's about what you said earlier in the show, which was you would love for them to find a solution for their own problem. Because you're not forcing, you're not trying to convince, you're not selling. You're trying to get them to solve their own problem.
Because that's what they're going to do anyway. Especially as an agent, one of the hardest things is the owner of the property or the buyer of the property is really calling the shots.
Yeah, we're not.
Their money. They got to solve their problem, and they got to have the sense of autonomy to do it.
And I think in today's market, and as it shifts, it's going to become more and more paramount for us as communicators, as advisors, as agents, as whatever you want to consider yourself as, connectors, influencers, to be able to find ways to communicate with either party, whatever party you may have, in a way where they can have the autonomy to come up with their own decisions. In the past 3 years, it's been very different, right? You've had to force them. If you want this, you got to take it, or it's going to be gone tomorrow, right? I mean, you're kind of.
But that's pushing. Not happening today, right?
You're pushing, right? You're just enforcing their. Do I have to do this? Yes. Yeah. Right. I mean, there's really no choice. If you want it, yes.
But we're going to go back to this story. I'm going to guide you through it a little, because there's two things about the story. One is, you're talking about never split the difference, but another one that's really interesting. And this interview, I think, releases right before you and I, is something we talked about, was understanding the emotions at play. Because at first it was like, okay, well, like, you're like the freaking best guy for the job. What other stats do they need to see? And it was like, whoa, it's not about the stats. It's about, there's an emotional thing going on here. And then in that, there's two things. Like when we talk about Chris Voss or other quote unquote negotiating techniques from understanding NLP and understanding, like Oren Klaff's book, Pitch Anything, Holding the Frame. Well, here's where I'm going with all that, is meet them where they are. And then to do that, it was number one, identifying the emotions, meeting them where they are. And then back to Eric Edmead's interview, who was right before ours, telling the story that helped you really meet them where they were. So that, as Chris Voss says, the person that you're talking to, it's not about them going, oh, you're right. Because that's, i.e. for, here it comes, y'all, fuck you. When you tell the story that they go, that's right. And you get it. And you hear me, that changes everything. So as I say that, you see where I'm leading you into your story? Because how much can you tell us about what happened in the living room?
So there was one particular party who I needed to focus on more than the other. And I had identified that obviously long before we went in there, because I found that was the one that it's now, the funny part is, now that party and myself have an awesome relationship. So, to this day, I don't know what the disconnect was, but I had to figure out what was the emotional driver. And by understanding that they felt they had an obligation, I needed to find out what was the obligation for. Why did you have someone who's not as experienced
as you and gets the results that you get?
So I did kind of figure that out, but I verified it when I was there. And I quite honestly, and as crazy as this sounds, I ignored the other person. I only focused on this one person. And because it was like, if I ignore that person, are they going to get mad enough to where they're going to kick me out of the house? But if I don't focus on this one person, I've got no chance. So I asked them, going back to what you had said, I'd asked them some questions, and then I asked if I could tell a story. Can I have 5 minutes here? Can I have 5 minutes of your time? I want to tell you a story which I think is super relatable to your situation and our situation. So I tell them this 5-minute story, really good story. Storytelling, super important. Being able to convey a message with feelings, super important, right? Because this was an emotional conversation. This wasn't a transactional conversation.
Convey the feeling, just the emotions.
Convey the feelings, convey the, be descriptive. Pull the emotions out and display them, not from you, but from the story, display them. So I tell them the story. It's a great story. It's 100% relative to their situation. And it was a true story of mine that I relayed. Halfway through the story, I see this particular party just kind of, and I know we're doing video and we're also doing audio, just kind of.
And most people listen to this, so yeah.
Just like sink in the chair a bit.
Relax.
And I knew right then and there.
In that moment
that I had the listing. And it was one of those things where I didn't know what it was going in. I had to dig and find out and ask questions. And just the pause, right? We did it earlier in the show. People love to talk about themselves. They love it. They love nothing more than to talk about themselves. They don't want to talk about you.
They want to be heard.
They don't want to. They don't want to hear what you have to say. Quit trying to sell them. They don't want to be sold. All they want to tell. What's everybody's most favorite word? No.
Right.
That's all they want to do is tell you no. Well,
I think it's like a 3-year-old. They like to say no or two. Terrible. No.
The terrible twos. Yeah.
Nails it. No. Yeah.
No. So, if you guys haven't read the book, I mean, and I'm not here to pitch a book, but Never Split the Difference is brilliant. It's
I think I read it 8
brilliant book
times.
on communication.
Yeah, 8 times.
Because it really
did.
Yeah, it's.
And he's
been
on the podcast a couple times. Yeah, it's like when I was an agent, if I got in a funk, you just turned that book on. Just wherever it was, it had something for me. It was so good.
And the funny thing is you want to empower them to say no. Exactly. Right? That's the kind of but it's saying no to
what you want them to say.
What you want them to eventually say yes. Right? It's a pretty wild
it's the
strategy,
question.
It's the question how you phrase it.
And this is a total Chris Voss thing. I think he's this is like a Chris Voss thing all the way. I don't even think anybody else talks about this one except people who know about it like us. But you ask most people are like, hey, what do I have to do to get the listing? Or could I list your house? And they'll say yes. And 67% of the time they're lying. But if you flip the question to what you want them to say no to, would you be opposed to considering me to list your home? No. And if they say yes, guess what? They mean it. So it's, I'm going to quote Chris Voss again, but it's not a sin to not get a deal. It's a sin to take a long time to not get a deal.
True.
Anyway.
So you'd love for him to tell you straight up. But yeah. And what's the stats on yes? There's 3 different types of yeses, right? Yeah.
3 times. I think it's the counterfeit, the whatever. Only one of them means it. Only one of them is legit.
But you know what that is? When they say, that's right.
Exactly.
That's the real yes.
Exactly.
Because now they've agreed to the entire.
Or the real yes is when they say no to the question you want them to say no to.
The first question too. That's right.
Right. That's when
are you opposed to me? Or are you opposed to having a discussion about me? Are you opposed to? Opposed is a great one because they want to say no so bad. So make them say no.
Yeah, the magic is the minute you ask, how often do we ask ourselves, how do I convince them? That is back to questions. One of my favorite quotes is from a book called A More Beautiful Question. In the beginning of the book, it says, make sure let me do the whole quote. Albert Einstein said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend the first 55 minutes to make sure and this is the wording of this is powerful to me, answering the right question. Right? Am I answering the right question? So back to how do I convince them? That may not be the question to answer because how do they convince themselves? What are the questions that they solve their own problem? If I'm having to say stuff, and you know this, but this is for everybody listening, if I'm saying stuff that I'm thinking I'm going to convince them, all I'm really doing is telling them that they're wrong. And you know how much people love that?
I think
Don't you love it when I tell you you're wrong, Rusty? I mean, I know you freaking love it. And I do too.
You do it quite a bit. So
exactly. Exactly.
I know. I think in our situation, I mean, I appreciate the Einstein saying and my answer there. Our situation is, are we asking the right questions?
Because it's the other person who's answering to my
right.
Right.
So for us,
exactly.
It's, are you asking the right questions? Because asking the right questions is everything. really. I think that it's,
well,
but nobody wants to ask because we fall into the same, category as wanting to talk about ourselves. I've sold this. I've done this. I have, $40 million last year. I did this. I did this. I did this. I sold your neighbor's house.
And what do they hear when you say that? Right? They hear that you think you're great and you're not really worried about them. Question for you about questions. When you were in that living room, and you've had many encounters since then, but this was such a powerful one. I remember because it was like, wow. And you were so dialed in. When you were in that living room, what were the questions you asked, and how did you know what to ask?
That's a good question. It was a while ago, and I'm not exactly sure what questions they were. It was relevant to, I did ask what the obligation was. Why do you feel obligated to the other party? Because I was either going to get shut down because it was too intrusive, or I was going to get the answer I'm looking for because there's something I didn't know, or some things I didn't know. So I had to find out what I didn't know. Right? That's the most important part. What didn't I know? Because I can't have a solution, or I can't allow for them to solve an issue about something that I can't get them to talk about.
Well, the most powerful part of that is like knowing that you don't know. Like, isn't it funny how
you don't know what you don't know?
Me and all my books, but there's another book by Vishen Lakhiani called The Code of an Extraordinary Mind. And in that book, part of what he talks about is how much we assume and don't even realize it's an assumption. And so like the power of walking into that room. Wait, what did you say?
We go through life assuming.
Yeah. But walking into that room and recognizing that awareness to dial into how much I don't know, to dial into the questions, to meet that other, I always call it meet them where they are, right? Like meet them where they are. Until you get that would be the equivalent of that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And those. So
that was my validation. I had hunches.
Yeah.
But I was unsure. So asking the right questions. I needed to ask questions and just shut up. I did. Just
We're going to call this interview
at the table.
How to Ask Questions and Shut Up.
So at the end of my show every week, throughout the show, we say some interesting things. And so we name the show at the end of the show every week. And it's always a good 2 minutes. Sometimes we say something and we immediately know it's the name of the show and it's 5 minutes in. But a lot of times at the end of the show we have to name it and then we debate about it and then
I love that. And y'all do it live, or you do it when you're recording? So at the end of every show, all of my shows, we could name this one, and we have the final 3 questions. But I have a few more questions for you first. I think we may have already been on for an hour. How much time do you have right now?
Oh, I'm good. I thought we had until 12, so I don't.
Oh, good. Okay.
I do this all. I'm good. I can talk forever.
Yeah, I know. It's what you make it very easy because we could just chit chat for days. All right. So you've been an agent for 25 years and you've become quite the listing agent of quite a huge number of multi-million-dollar properties and had a significant sales record. As you've gone through business, the industry has changed a lot and you've become more and more successful, clearly. What has been your biggest aha? Like your biggest this is how this works. Epiphany.
Yeah, it's really easy. I don't know when it happened, but I have a very different background than probably most people in the industry. I was a singer for many years. I was a professional musician. And so I didn't live in this space, right? That is an entirely different world that I lived in. It's a different world. And I, for so long, thought that I had to fit in. Right? Either for potential clients or for the people I worked around and with. And at some point I realized, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I'm me. I can't try to be somebody who fits in. I fit in because I'm, you know, I'm good with people. I'm cool with people. I get along with people. All that's good. But I just wasn't being me, to where I had to have I always wore long sleeve shirts to hide, a lot of imagery that I have on me permanently.
I've never seen the imagery.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
Tattoos. But
yeah, so I've got sleeves. So at some point I said, fuck it. Like, just be you. And it was one of those things where, first of all, it helped me mentally tremendously just to be me. And I realized that I'm probably going to lose clients, but I'm probably going to gain clients too. And the ones I'm gaining are the ones I'm actually going to want to work with. Not always, because that's not how it works, but it just made things so much easier for me to just be myself. Yeah. So it's okay to have, I think it's really, really important for you to do things other than just sell real estate. If you want to, or you can, or whatever. And I think it's important that a lot of your clients very much appreciate your outside existence from the world of just selling real estate.
Well, being that people tend to love real estate agents so much in the first place.
Right. Why not be you and allow them to enjoy or have a conversation with you about something other than the house or their investment property or the beach condo or whatever. And you have things in common that just make it a little bit easier. And then they trust you more. So the aha moment was, and it wasn't one particular time. It took a while. But just realizing that I can do this. And eventually I became much more successful at it by
being you,
by just being me, by just doing what I do and being around the people who I enjoy being around. And those people, you gravitate towards that.
Well, it makes me like what you just said. When I was an agent, I've always been just super curious about people. Like ever since I was could think, I'm always curious about how people operate, what's going on. So when I'm an agent, every top agent, this is part of what inspired this podcast, was so different. They're not all doing the same stuff. Now there's some consistencies, there's some principles they're living by that are what the common denominator is. And one of those was, one day I was like, every time there's a top agent, the one thing they are is who they are. The one thing they are is the best versions of themselves through this business.
Yeah, 100%. I think that it's neat to see too.
It's fun,
because
isn't it?
when you're around people and you understand their quirks and their interests and their hobbies and all the stuff they do outside of work, it's cool to understand these people.
Because and this is a hospitality business. I think people miss out on this. Everybody in hospitality that comes into this industry, if they learn their market and hone in, people in hospitality do better. I mean, they're like the most successful real estate agents, to what you're saying, because they know how to be interested in the whole person. That's hospitality.
Yes. So
you're kind of like, are you like, I don't know if I buy that, or what is your mind doing right now?
I was trying to think, because most of the clients, think about this, and this is just something that popped into my mind. Most of the clients don't like to talk about their work. If they're working all the time, What do they like to do outside of work? Probably some of the stuff you like to do outside of work. So does that make you more compatible with them to have just a general conversation about certain things? And do they then trust you more? Are you able to build a rapport with them that's a little bit more genuine, right? Understanding that, my daughter, this is being factual. So my daughter is my 12-year-old daughter, very accomplished golfer. All right, I grew up playing golf, and she does things at 12 that I've never been able to do.
So cool, by the way.
So when I come across people, clients, and their daughters play golf, do you have any idea how great that connection is?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's a totally different. And then the next time you see them, hey, I was thinking about, they bring it up. You don't even have to. That's the type of stuff talking about just being you and kind of honing in and understanding, and then finding people that have the same interest, because they don't want to talk. They don't. If they do, I don't know what they do. If they sell insurance,
they don't want to talk about it.
They want to talk about insurance. It's like, I've always said this, which I find funny. The guy or the girl who's married to the massage therapist. They never get massages, right?
Yeah. Right.
Right.
The last probably don't. But anyway,
the last thing on earth that spouse wants to come home and do after giving a day's worth of massages
is give anybody a massage.
Give you a massage.
Right.
So they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, also, I remember, it's so funny how, I think it's all businesses, but it seems to be, all this stuff seems to be more and more relevant in luxury, is two things. The business of being a real estate agent is kind of intimate. You're like married to a family for the period of time that they're your client.
Yeah, right.
And the better ones are not the ones who are your family members by blood, but the ones who come in and you have that connection, like family. Like, those are the clients that are good clients. And I have found, as I've known other agents across the country and the world who are selling the big properties, or in my own business when I was an agent, it's been 2 years now since I've sold houses. I can't believe that. But is that it's when you bring in a client, it's like bringing in a family member. It's that kind of connection, because you get to know them really well, whether they like it or not.
In a very short period of time.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I kind of relate that to, I've always said that people sometimes get upset if they lose friends, or let's just leave it there, right? They just lose friends. They get disconnected from people or acquaintances or whatever. And I've always said it that, people are in your life for a particular period of time. And whatever that time may be is what it was supposed to be, right? So you may have somebody who's in your life for a week, and it was really, really important, and it was awesome, and it turned into whatever it turned into, and it was a week, and then you never speak to the person again. Or it's a month, or it's 3 years, or it's a lifetime. Obviously, the longer the term, the less of them there are. So these families or these clients or whatever, some of them, you have them for 45 days. You meet them, you sell them a house, and it is what it was, and it was super transactional, and you guys had nothing, and they never call you again, and they sell the house for somebody else, and you move on, and it is what it is. Other clients you have for your entire career, because you guys get along. They trust you. They've sent you a ton of business, ton of family, ton of friends, ton of coworkers. So just be okay with knowing that these clients can be super intimate for a short period of time, or they can be the ones that last your career. They're all there for a purpose. You can't force it to be anything more than what it's supposed to be. But it's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. What do you think is, I'm going to do another interview question. I know you love that, but I want to get this out of you. We're not having it. We're not this is a conversation. This is just a question I'm going to ask you while we have a conversation.
Hangout session. That's what we call it. Hangout sessions. We don't do it.
I love that. Yeah. I'm going to change my podcast invitations to hangout session.
There you go. By Rusty.
Now I've got like, what did you say? Bye, Rusty? Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Rusty. That's a kind of an inside joke with my friends. Like, okay, bye. Anyway, but question is, now I've got a few, but here's one that when you look at, like kind of like as we talk, I found on this show, a lot of people, we like to talk about our successes. You've given us a lot of good stuff that was beyond that. Some of the, what makes us great is our failure. What makes us great is when we like really fucking like stumped our toe or broke our leg or whatever and got through it. As you look at that, do you have a story? Like, here's where I just really made a mistake and how I got through it and what I learned or how I came into a situation that was kind of like what you've given us. But I think here's the short version of this question. What's the biggest, best lesson you've learned in your career of being an agent?
Man, that's really hard. This is why I don't do interviews.
Oh, there's so many though, right?
Yeah.
There's so many lessons that we learn.
There's so
as an agent,
I'm just a lesson every day. I mean, it's a wild. I told someone this last night who said, if there's one thing you could tell me, like one piece of advice, and this is kind of deflecting from the question, but
that's okay.
My one piece of advice, and this is really for new agents, I would think, or someone who's doing it part-time or whatever. And this is really just to kind of protect you. And we're doing this for a living, right? We all want to get paid. It's nice to help people.
It's good.
But we chose this to make money. This is how we pay our bills.
We're not going to make it. Most of us aren't going to make it if we don't get paid. It's not really a career, an industry if you're not getting paid. Yeah.
So I said, never agree to a credit, never agree to a commission reduction on the first transaction.
Absolutely.
So, but a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people.
Well, it goes back to that stat. 67% of the time when people say something, it's a lie, whether they know it or not. Usually they don't.
So I learned this I was very green, very young in my career. And I had a client who I was listing in their house. We're selling their house. They were going to buy something. They were upgrading. And so we were close on a deal on their sale. And to get the deal done, I had to give some sort of credit or break on the commission, which I agreed to do because I was going to get their purchase. And then, 2 weeks later, they go and they find an open house and buy an open house property, right? So I had lost the commission. I mean, it happens. Yeah. Look, that's the conversation. Right, exactly. You just have to understand that people are going to do that to you. Well,
or you do what we said, don't do it on the first.
So you never
ideally
do it on
never
the first.
do it. But if you're going to do it,
Correct.
Certainly it better be on the second.
But you have to, because that's their incentive, obviously, to use you on that purchase, right? You have to, I'm not saying you have to manipulate these people, but you have to give these people, first of all, it shows them that you're standing your ground to an extent, right? I'm happy.
And kind of holding them accountable.
Happy to do it, but we'll do it on the next transaction.
It's for some reason today with you, I keep thinking about, it's like clients are like, and I don't mean this to be undermine clients, or I don't mean for this to sound like clients are less than at all. It could come across that way, but just as an analogy in managing people is sometimes there's a lot of similarities to a 3-year-old. No is their favorite word, right? They say something, they think they mean it. And the other thing is, it's funny how like you've got kids find a lot of comfort in set other people and people who know how to set healthy boundaries. And that doesn't mean, I find people in real estate will say, well, we need boundaries. Boundaries, it's all in how you think about them. Are boundaries created to push people away? Because most people think of them that way. And a lot of agents who do that have a lot less But when you recognize boundaries as setting a strong foundation to bring clients into a safe place where there's somebody, back to what you said, who's got the confidence and the calm to manage the situation, that's where you're actually winning more business and making more money.
Yeah, you always will. I think not in the short term, potentially. But in the long term, you'll always have better business.
I think not to, I love to you love when I don't agree with you. I think in the short term too.
Well, if you're pissing somebody off in the short term, it's not.
Well, that's the whole point, right? Like you got to do it in a way that doesn't piss them off. You got to do it in a way that
but you're dealing with 3-year-olds, as you just said. So it's like you trying to set the boundaries for your 3-year-old, and she gets pissed off at you because she.
But you know what the 3-year-old? Well, see, that's why I'm glad I brought this up. That you know what the 3-year-old really wants at the end of the day, the sense of autonomy. So when you set the situation up where they have a sense of autonomy and power in the relationship, it's going to reel them in instead of push them out. Back to how you think about boundaries.
So I'll tell you a funny story. So we had lunch. Should I tell this story? This is a funny story.
Yeah.
We had lunch. We had a lunch down here in Fort Lauderdale. And Jere was so kind to show up. And
wait, no, this was which lunch? Keep going. I'll be quiet.
So we had to go around the table and introduce ourselves. There were some people in there that not everybody knew, that were new to the firm or whatever the situation was.
That was the breakthrough lunch. That was the coaching lunch.
The coaching lunch.
That was the lunch I hosted, right? Yes, just by the way. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. She hosted. She showed up. It was very nice. It's very nice.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. This is fun.
We had to tell about ourselves a little bit, tell a little bit about something, or tell about what we get out of Breakthrough, and tell a little bit about ourselves and yada, yada. And I said, what I feel as though I truly get out of Breakthrough is that Jere is my therapist. Remember that? Remember I said it's weekly therapy, bi-weekly therapy. It's good therapy. It's
right. Well, my favorite was you said I've never lasted with anybody for more than maybe one call. Was that it?
Nah, a few calls.
Or maybe I'll let you. It's your story.
I think it's more. No, I honestly think it was more them not being able to deal with me, because I'm not and you can probably attest to this. I'm not someone who really is gonna, like, we get on our coaching calls.
Right.
And we just talk for an hour. Right.
But we get somewhere.
Of course we do. We always do.
Yeah.
But I'm not a very good, organizer or chart maker or any of that stuff. I don't do that. I don't do it well. That goes back to me.
Because you're a problem solver.
At some point saying, I just have to be me. Right? There's some things that I do really well and other things that I just do really poorly. So I'm not going to focus on things that maybe other people do really, really well. And I'm sure your guidance and your coaching and everything and on that type of structure is an immense help to them. My mind doesn't work that way. So I can't do it. So when we got through our first half of a call, she probably thought I was totally nuts, because I'm like, yeah,
I'm
not going to do that. I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to do that. So if we want to find different ways to put this whole thing together, we can do that and try to find it, make it beneficial for both of us. And it's been, but honestly, Jere's ability to veer in an entirely different direction for me and what I needed to get out of these sessions. I mean, it goes to your ability and your talent and, what you're able to do with what your goals, but you're able to manipulate.
Well, they're your goal, right? Yeah. Well, you can't back to, it's the book. I'm all about the books today, but you got to do what you're good at and leverage. That's what I love about real estate. 2 things, no matter what, if you're going to be successful in this business, it's going to your character must develop or you will fail. And then number 2, you have the ability to leverage what you're good at and outsource the rest.
Yeah, that's
dialing on your strengths. That is what you should be doing. All the other shit.
Yeah.
You better figure out how to leverage. Back to the point. Like if there's something I'm not good at, I need not do it, but I sure as heck better figure out how to leverage it and make sure that person's set up for success. Mm-hmm. Now back to you. I'll pay you later for that. Just kidding. But we got about 15 minutes and we have to do the final three because we do those on every show. And here's the first one.
What's the final three? What do you mean?
The final three. We're going back to an interview mode. Well, we haven't really been in interview mode, which is really fun. But the question number one, when you look at your whole career, what has been your best resource for your success?
Resource. Is that personal resource? Is that outside resource? Outside resource?
Here's what I love about that is when I ask that question, it is incredibly vague and broad and could mean anything. And most people just answer it. And that's why I ask it that way, to see what they'll pull out and how they'll receive the question. But you're like, well, what kind of resource? Just like, once again, what makes you so awesome, you pay attention, like that you get, like you get it, you dial in, you know what's up. The original question was designed, I've had this podcast for I think 6 years, to find out about tools like, by the way, Canva. They're not sponsoring the show yet, but Canva is a freaking awesome resource. Or CRM. That was originally the reason why I asked the question. Okay. And so then I started finding that there was other stuff that came out of people when I broadened it. So that might even be. So as I say it, it's still up to you. But is there even a CRM or something that you find cool, or is there something better? Because you don't like the organizing.
I know, I'm so bad at it. I would say, so I'll give you two. I'll give you an external and an internal. I think, or personal, I guess. And me, the funny part about is when I'm doing my show, and we do this thing at the end called 5 questions.
Are you going to have me on your show?
Yeah. You want to come on? What do you want to talk about?
Oh, come on. But I'll be useless. I'll be useless.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting for sure.
Right. We can talk about nothing. We could do that. We could do that. But it won't be football. Maybe it would, but you'd have to teach me everything and I wouldn't retain, or maybe I would. Anyway, back
in
to
the off season, we do a thing called 5 questions, which is we do like, we get questions from Reddit, and it's just really random stuff. And I would say I'm sometimes the worst at answering, because I ask then further questions to the questions. And it drives them nuts.
That's awesome.
It drives them crazy.
But like right there, you wrapped up in a bow. There's what makes you so great at developing business and relationships is the questions. You just naturally come up with questions and get them talking about themselves.
Yeah. So the answer is outside. I would say connections, and that's broad. I know it's broad, but I was told, man, this was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, by a consultant in the industry, and I thought it was another aha moment for me. So this was an actual instance. This was an acute scenario. He says to me, there are 2 types of really successful agents in the high-end market. He said there's grinders and there's connectors. And I had always been a grinder. And at some point that gets a bit tiresome, right? I've been doing this 25 years, right?
And it can backfire when you go up in the price points.
Sure. I mean, it becomes less sustainable. And then you tend to have to work harder as you get older because you're not as efficient. You're not as, I wouldn't say motivated, but you don't quite have the energy you did, right? 10, 15 years ago to really grind it out.
I'm still in denial, but yes.
I every single day of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I said, well, holy damn. I never had somebody put it to me that
holy
way.
Damn. I've never had somebody say holy damn.
Well, I wanted to say
like that.
I wanted to say holy fuck or holy shit, and I figured that I'd go in a different direction. So damn it was. D-A-M.
And you never heard something like something else other than holy damn, which was?
I had never heard somebody tell me there's grinders and connectors. And I thought to myself, not that I've been doing this wrong the whole time, but that's what they've always meant about networking, which I've been okay.
I hate that word. There goes another trigger word for Jere Metcalf.
Here's the thing.
But I agree. I know what you mean, and I agree.
Yes. Yeah. So if you would have just told me 20 years ago, if you would have said connecting, if somebody had said connecting to me
instead of networking,
as opposed to networking to me,
yeah, exactly,
it would have changed my mindset entirely. And so I'm still mad about that. That nobody ever
should be, because you're such a great connector. Like you are, by the way, everybody. Rusty Hanna, I think I know a lot of real estate agents. I think everybody knows that. You might be among the best of connectors. You really are. Anyway, keep going, please.
But I'd have been a lot further along a lot long ago.
Tapped into that talent sooner.
If I had understood the word connecting as opposed to networking, because I'm not a networker.
Well, like every networking event, it's like if it has networking in front of it, I'm not even going to finish the sentence. It's not going to be nice. It's like networking.
I can't do like physically, like it gives me a headache.
Because
so very interesting, funny story, totally related, unrelated. I came home last night. I had a little event with some fantastic people down in Miami last night. Great agents.
This was one Sotheby's event, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So, it was a connecting party.
Right.
Within the industry. I mean, we all for the most part know each other. So it's really about just kind of
networking,
brainstorming and creating, the market changes.
Networking's fine when you're connecting.
Okay, fine. So I came home last night. I'm sitting down and I'm having a conversation with my wife. Her name is Stephanie. And she's got like 1 trillion
Instagram followers or something. But anyway, which is pretty cool. Amazing. Yeah.
So she says to me, "You don't have a headache, do you?" And I said, "No." She's like, "Wow, that's pretty cool." Because those events literally give me headaches. So anyway.
But you connected at that one.
Yeah. So it's a different mindset. I'm telling you, it's a different mindset. So anyone who's listening, think of it differently. So I thought to myself, that was more of an aha moment. I thought to myself, I'm not connecting enough. Because when you connect and you build those connections, and those connections build connections, when you don't have to grind as much, and as you're getting further along and more seasoned in your industry and have more experience, by the time you're trying to wind it down, you have the connections to bring you business to where you don't have to grind at all.
Well,
and that's the true transition.
It makes me think about you. I think you're a fellow fan of Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm.
Some people apparently don't like the guy anymore, but I'm still rather fond of him.
He's kind of a brilliant guy.
Yeah. And he talks about, he's talked about this in a few of his podcast interviews, but he talks about I always forget what people call it, but you know what? There's a mindset they call wholesome something. Do you know what I mean? Like when you believe that there's only so much, and if you're going to get any of it, you've got to take it. Like he talks about that concept, and there's a name for it, and I can't remember the name right now.
I don't know what it is, but go ahead.
But it's there's this mentality that when you go into any industry, you've got to, whatever you want has to be taken. It's to what you're talking about, believe it or not. That's a grind. That would be a grinder. I'm going to go in and figure out what I can get out of this meeting, and the cards I can get, and the business I'm going to get, and whatever I'm going to take. And he says there's another way of looking at business where you go and you look at what you want to build. When you were talking about connecting and the connections and how, and then once you build something, that's something that you build is contributing. Not to sound all woo-wee and rainbow and butterflies.
No. That's the perfect. That's the word though. Realize that these people that you're building these relationships with and you're connecting, they know you want business from them. That's not the point. The point is, what can you provide for them? Right? So you saying contributing. What can you contribute to them to make their existence easier, better, less of a hassle or headache? It's all about you providing value to whoever these people are that you've got in your sphere. And I think that's when you go to the networking events, because that's what I'll call it when I say you're just looking for business, you're not getting shit. Like you're not getting a card and then the next day you're going to get a listing appointment, right? That's just not how it works. I mean, maybe you get lucky from time to time, but that's just not a sustainable plan.
Well, no, have you ever met somebody and said, oh yes, I'm going, you don't, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
And in addition to your point is as you build, like, so Elon Musk, like once you build something, what you build gives you more, it creates so much more and gives you so much more than you could ever take because of what it contributes to others and gives to you. And in real estate too, I love to add, like, sometimes it's like, oh, so we write thank you cards and we're nice to them. Well, you should do that anyway. It's like, no, let's get strategic. What are you good at? How does that contribute? How do you align? Like really build something, people, like, right? Like as agents, right. Build something. Like we can actually, and we don't have time for this today, but we can actually create inventory as brokers in our business. Like there's so much we can do that we don't even Elon Musk is an example because look at what he's done in industries and people said not possible, but it's shifting that perspective on like, what can I build? What do I build that, and look at what it generates. But what you said, like literally was like bringing that, because it's exactly what you said. Elon Musk said it too, just so you know. Our friend.
I didn't hear him say it, so it must
I always say Elon Musk.
Like-minded.
I always say Elon Musk is my boyfriend. He just doesn't know it.
He doesn't know it.
Yeah. No, it's probably better that way. I bet I like the version of him in my mind the best. All right, we've got like 2 more minutes and 2 more questions, and I can go a couple minutes over. I don't know if you can, but just so you know, to watch the time.
I'm fine. I blocked my entire day out for you because I know how much you love to talk.
Me? I thought it was you.
No, that's not me. I prefer not to. Anyway, go ahead.
Right?
Yeah. 2 other questions.
Is that just what I bring out of you then?
Oh, it's all good.
You let me interrupt you. That's the thing that makes it so great for me is, you know. So. I don't have a choice. Do I have a choice? Yeah, you have a choice. Well, usually I consciously don't interrupt people. At least lately, but with you, it's just, I like to be interrupted too, because it keeps the conversation moving. Like I'm in a train of thought. If you'll finish my sentence, then we can go it's not even to make a point. It's like to explore and get somewhere better with this conversation. Yeah. Tangents are good. Exactly. So question number 2, you kind of said it, but I'll ask it again just in case there's something else. If there's any book you could recommend, like it's easy. Career, life, business. What is it? That's easy. Never Split the Difference. Me too. Yeah. I mean, Chris Voss, it's the funny part is like the first chapter, you're like, what am I listening to? Or what am I reading? Yeah, I listen to it too. It's like, this is going to do nothing for me. You're literally reading it or listening to it. And I'm like, why? I don't know if I can get through this. That was my first thought. Like there's zero relation to now, when did you first? This is all because I only read it because like literally 10 people in a row on the podcast told me to read it, and I'm like, okay, gotta read it. And then I just went through it anyway. When was the first time you read the book? Probably a couple of years ago. So anyway, so you're reading the book. You're like, how am I going to get through this? So keep going. Yeah, you got through because I was like, this doesn't relate to me at all. And then it's one of those things where it's like watching. Trying to think of a really slow. It's like watching. Have you seen Succession? Yeah, yeah, okay. Great show. So the first 4 or 5 episodes, I said I can't do this. Like, it's so mundane and so boring, but it's just building, right? It's just one of those shows. It just builds and builds and builds. So that's this book for me. At some point, things start to like filter in to where you're like, oh, okay, that makes a little bit of sense. Oh, okay. And then by the time you're in like chapter 6 or 7, you're like wanting to go back to the beginning because you're like, well, clearly I missed some shit. Like I wasn't paying enough attention in the beginning of the book. I definitely wasn't at the beginning that I read that thing 8 times. I remember, like I said this before what were you gonna say? No, I think that it's interesting because and a lot of the questions that I had about the book was, well, okay, but how am I, because it's about negotiating ultimately, right? But it's about communications and how to.
negotiate.
It's counterintuitive things. Like when I read that book, right. I would hit play 8 times. I listened to that book when I was an agent. I would be doing 15 contracts at that time. Like I'm in it. So every time I listened, there was something to apply. And this, I think for me, was so powerful. And the same for you and most real estate agents who are in it and listening to this book or reading it. Again, we listened. I would listen and there would be something I could apply and I would do it. And I would think to myself, we're going to cuss again. I'm very conscious that we see how good I'm being. When I know I'm being recorded, I'm so good. But it's like, there's no fucking way. These people are going to lose their shit. And I would do it. I'd repeat what they said and pause and count to 20 until they said something. And then I would ask them for the no. And I mean, every time I go, because everything had gotten so intense in the market. I had all these contracts, but it was an intense market. And so I'm like, all right, I'm just going to do it. He said it.
Yeah, I'm going to blow this shit up. Here we go.
Might as well see I just do it. And all of a sudden it would again and again and again, what came on the other end in response to what I was doing, following what this book said, was completely opposite of what I would have expected.
What you would have done.
And was saving me so much pain. I'd gotten in the habit of thinking that being nice and carrying the pain of my people was going to make it better, and it doesn't. And it relinquished so much freaking stress and got so many more deals done for me. It was nuts. Yeah. Because it's so counterintuitive. You don't believe it.
No, it's counterintuitive, but it's also being able to figure out how and where to apply it, because it's not specific to this book is not specific to real estate.
Not at all, which is what I love about it, by the way. That's what makes it so good. As far away from
real estate as you can get. So when he's talking about negotiating his car deal, right? His red truck or whatever it was.
I don't even remember that. I got to read the book again now.
It's one of those things where you're doing the direct negotiation. So this works. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm not really negotiating directly as an agent. So how am I to apply this to structure to apply it to another agent who then you have to hope relays it properly? So what I do is I think I told this story on the Q&A. I just had a deal.
We need to tell everybody what the Q&A is, but now keep going.
I'm not really sure what it is. You can tell them. I just showed up.
No, we'll tell them that in a minute. It's part of the coaching program. But anyway, now that we're going to advertise the coaching on the today. Usually we don't even do that, right? But anyway, it's the Friday call with top agents in the country who come on and we ask questions and you shared, and it's even better than the podcast because we really get into the good stuff. But go ahead with what you had
this happen. This was a month ago.
Right.
I had a client who was at a number. I had the buyer was at a number. I had the seller was at, it was a couple $100,000 higher. And my buyer was done. That's where he was going to be. And I'm like, all right, how do I put this in text? Because what I want this agent to do, because I think it happens a lot more now than it used to, I want this agent to screenshot this and send it to their seller. Because then I'm somehow communicating directly with the seller in the message I'm trying to get across. Mm-hmm. So I had said, I understand where we're at and blah, blah, blah. How, which is a great question.
Right. Open-ended. Or I think Chris Voss calls it calibrated.
How can we make this happen at this number? And that was it. That was the end of the text. Because we don't have a solution.
Let them solve your problem.
We need the sellers to solve this problem. So what I'm hoping you're going to do is screenshot this and ask the sellers, how can we make this happen at this number? The next text I got back, sellers agreed to that number. So,
wow.
But you're not, so my thing was I have to structure my communication with the agents in a way, hopefully, that they screenshot and send it to the seller.
Well, here's one I've got to add. I got to add to your story because here's one I love. We had a situation, and we had an agent telling us that the seller was not going to take a penny less than asking on a house, right? And the house was it was the most expensive sale in that neighborhood ever. And he was basically like, don't even send me an offer if it's not full price. But that had been sent. And then he came back and said, look, it has to be full price, and kept sending statistics on why his listing should get full price. And so here's what I say we, it was Bridget Posey, who was a partner on my team. And it was Bridget's client. And Bridget and I talked about it. And we decided that this is what she was going to say. She sent the message to the agent. I mean, right back to your point about how making sure we use this stuff so it's relayed to the client. It sounds like your clients don't want to do this deal. What should I tell my client?
Mm-hmm. Labeling.
Right. And that was like, whoa. What? That was kind of putting the no and the calibrated question on them at one time. And the
sellers are like, what the fuck?
Well, how do you put the problem on them to solve it? Right. Like it's just like another way to do it. And it's all like, that's where it's like listening to that book 8 times. And I would tell you, the book is not about real estate, which I think is so relevant, because when we get into the real estate as a real estate agent, we're getting so attached to ideas, and even like we're getting this paradigm that is just not, it is a fault. We live in a false, hey, no offense to anybody, but as real estate agents, there's a paradigm we kind of slip into of what it means to be a realtor. And then we start doing those things that actually make people not like realtors. And then we go down this rabbit hole. It's like, what if you weren't a realtor? What if you were a person looking out for someone and doing what real estate agents actually do that brings so much value, that's kept us in this business for so long? Changes everything, which brings back so much of the power of that book. All right, question. Well, do you want to add to that before I ask you the next question?
No.
Okay.
No.
Oh, and I actually have I have a call in a couple of minutes. Erin's coming on. Erin's going to be on the podcast in a few weeks, but she's coming on the Q&A in 2 minutes. She can wait. Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Send me the link. I'm going to jump in there.
Oh, yeah. It's the same one. It's the same one. It's this. Actually, if you want to stay on, we'll stop the recording. But if you'll stay on, you can, because she's like, okay, what about, come on, Erin, you got this.
100%.
But
I'm going to come in there just to bother her. Is that okay?
We're going to do the last, but there's only one more question.
Oh, okay.
The last question is, if there's one thing of all the stuff we've had so much fun talking about on this interview, if there's one thing you want to make sure everybody takes away from this, what is it?
Be you. I mean, it's corny, man, but just be yourself. I got through many years of this business of fake it till you make it, which I still, that's okay. Because at some point,
it depends on what you mean by it, right?
Correct. Because it
can be interpreted a lot of ways.
You have to, if you don't have the confidence, suck it up. You have to figure out a way. You have to figure out a way to fake it until you make it, right? You've got to figure out a way to get that confidence.
This is not to geek out, but NLP, self-concept, there's a whole thing that you can do with that you dial in to buy it back to where you were. I want to say who the fuck you really are. Like, who are you? That's where you got to dial in, not who you want to kid yourself about, but who are you? I always say, I'm not into like, you're enough. Because what's deep in there, your DNA is a lot more than enough. You just got to dial in, pull it out, and show up with it.
And be strategic about it. I mean, I'll tell you, I'm very heavy on social media. I do a lot of marketing, and
everybody check it out. You got brilliant marketing
on my stuff.
Brilliant, yeah.
The stuff that gets by far the most interaction is my personal stuff, because I have one account. Right. I know people that have a business account and a personal account. I have one account. Because of that, realize that I used to have 2 accounts.
Should we bring you back on to talk about marketing? Because you actually have the best marketing. You're really good.
Oh, hold on. I got a fuzzy there.
Oh yeah. And we've even talked about how you could make it better. But the funny thing is, it's really good.
Yeah. Look, I'm a visual guy. I'm a graphics person. I'm a photography person. So like all of that stuff, all my social media, I do myself. But the point is, people love to see you as a person. If you're just throwing out real estate and throwing out stats and doing this and throwing out your listings and your sales, scream it from the mountaintops, 100%. You have to be vocal. You have to show people what you're doing. But my most interaction is on my personal stuff by a mile.
We know that makes you see, this is where, I don't know what it is about us. We could talk forever. But there's always like something out there for the realtor that's like the cool thing to do right now. And right now it's differentiate. The irony of all of that is the best way that you could differentiate is two things. And they're exactly what you just said. Number one, actually know the market, because it's shocking how many agents don't know the market, and every top agent does. And number two is, I already forgot, but number one is know the market. And number two is, I think it was knowing, oh my God, I feel like it, like edit, just kidding. But I love you. See, but number two is knowing who you are.
Was that number two?
I don't know. I like it though. So I'm going to go with it. So it, like smooth it over. It was to what you said. It is knowing the market. It is. I'm like, it was about knowing who you are. What it is who you really are. That authenticity. Like everybody, like when you go and fake it till you make it or pretend somebody you're not, nobody like they can't tell you're faking it. Like people know. That's not it.
That's not
that
it.
Is
it's not being somebody that you're not, but the fake it till you make it. It's being who you are. You need.
Well, no, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
I'm actually agreeing with you. It's like you said, the one thing we want everybody to remember in the show is be you. Like be who you are.
Yeah.
Be who you are. And back to the differentiation. If you're going to differentiate, actually knowing the market and actually who you are, like your authentic self showing up in everything that you do is the most beautiful thing that you could do.
Because
you know how to brand it well, by the way.
They're genuine and you can be yourself and it comes across much, much better.
Mm-hmm.
People believe you. People trust you. And that's what you need as trusted advisors. You need them to trust in your abilities, but also trust in the fact that you've got their backs, that you're looking out for them.
Exactly. Rusty, we're going to close out now because Aaron's going to hop in. You're going to stay, but we're going to end the show or end the recording. But first, I just want to say, everybody, Rusty Hanna, South Florida, One Sotheby's International Realty. Thank you for being on the Jere Metcalf Podcast. We're top real estate agents. Tell how they do it.
Thanks for having me.
You're supposed to say you're welcome.
You're welcome.
So,